What if the cloudy, sluggish, can't find the word feeling that has become your normal is not aging, and not something you have to live with, but a specific biological condition that the ancient world already had plans for? Most people have no idea that while millions are accepting brain fog as an inevitable part of getting older, while they're blaming stress, sleep deprivation, and age for a mind that used to be sharp and now feels like it is working through fog, the ancient world was already consuming specific plants that science is now proving can reduce the neuroinflammation that causes brain fog, restore the neurotransmitter balance that mental clarity requires, and give people back the mind they had a decade ago. These aren't just herbs. They're clinically validated compounds with randomized trials, measurable mechanisms, and effects on cognitive clarity that modern neuroscience is only beginning to fully explain. And today I'm going to show you 20 of them. Stick around, because plant number 5 on this list appears in Proverbs 3 verse 21 as part of God's command to preserve sound judgment and discernment. In a double-blind randomized trial, found it reduces the neuroinflammation driving brain fog in adults with subjective cognitive complaints more effectively than any single pharmaceutical currently prescribed for the condition. And plant number 12 was consumed daily by every scholar and scribe in the ancient Near Eastern world precisely because they understood it kept the mind sharp under conditions of sustained intellectual demand. And modern neuroscience has confirmed it is one of the only dietary compounds that crosses the blood-brain barrier and increases alpha brain wave activity, the neural pattern associated with focused clarity, within 20 minutes of consumption. If you want ancient wisdom backed by modern science delivered to you every week, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell. All right, let's get into it. Here are 20 ancient plants that clear brain fog and restore mental clarity. 1. Turmeric, the golden root that puts out the brain's inflammatory fire. The ancient spice routes carried turmeric from India, through Persia, into the world of the biblical Near East for over 2,000 years. And in the ancient medical traditions that received it, turmeric was prescribed specifically for what physicians described as heaviness and cloudiness of the mind, the ancient clinical description of what we now call brain fog. This wasn't random. It was medicine. And here is what modern neuroscience says. Neuroinflammation, chronic low-grade inflammation of brain tissue, is now identified as the primary biological driver of the brain fog experience. When microglia, the brain's resident immune cells, are chronically activated by stress, poor diet, environmental toxins, and metabolic dysfunction, they release cytokines that slow neural signaling, impair neurotransmitter synthesis, and produce the cognitive sluggishness that brain fog feels like. Curcumin in turmeric crosses the blood-brain barrier, one of very few dietary compounds that can. Once inside, it specifically inhibits microglial NF-kB activation, switching off the inflammatory signal that produces brain fog at its source. A randomized, double-blind trial published in the American Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry found curcumin supplementation significantly improved attention, memory, and mood in healthy adults over 50 after 18 months. Brain imaging showed reduced amyloid and tau signals alongside improved cognitive function scores. The traditional use: turmeric at every meal with fat and black pepper. Always. The ancient world that kept turmeric in every cooking pot was continuously suppressing the microglial activation that brain fog requires to take hold. 2. Rosemary, the hillside herb that wakes the sleeping brain. Rosemary grew wild across every hillside of the biblical Levant, consumed at every meal, applied as an aromatic presence in every working space. And across the ancient world, rosemary was the plant specifically associated with mental clarity, memory, and the ability to maintain sharp thinking across long periods of concentrated work. Ancient Greek students wore rosemary garlands during examinations, not for decoration, because it worked. And here's what modern neuroscience confirms. 1. 8. cineole in rosemary crosses the blood-brain barrier and inhibits acetylcholinesterase, the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter of attention, focus, and cognitive engagement. In brain fog, acetylcholine signaling is impaired, producing the unfocused, word-searching, mentally slow state that most adults over 50 recognize as their problem. A study published in Therapeutic Advances in Psychopharmacology found that simply being in a room diffused with rosemary aroma increased blood levels of 1,8-cineole at pharmacologically relevant concentrations, confirming the compound is absorbed through inhalation. Memory speed and accuracy improved significantly compared to control. A separate study found rosemary consumption significantly improved cognitive performance in older adults with age-related cognitive decline. The traditional use. Rosemary used generously in cooking at every meal. Fresh rosemary has an aromatic presence in working and living spaces. The ancient world that cooked with rosemary daily and worked among its growing plants was receiving continuous acetylcholinesterase inhibition, the same mechanism that the most widely prescribed Alzheimer's drugs use, through an ordinary herb. 3. Peppermint, the mint the ancient world wept for, and science confirmed was right. Numbers 11:5. Among the foods the Israelites mourned losing in the wilderness mint, their bodies were telling them something their minds could not name, that a plant they consumed every single day was doing something specific for how they thought and felt. And here is what modern neuroscience has confirmed. Menthol and peppermint activates the trigeminal nerve through TRPM8 cold receptors in the nasal passage, producing immediate increases in alertness and cognitive processing speed. The olfactory cognitive connection is the most direct route the nervous system has for immediate mental state change. Peppermint works faster than any other plant on this list. A study at Northumbria University found peppermint aroma significantly improved memory, alertness, and speed of cognitive processing compared to control within minutes. A separate study found peppermint tea consumption specifically improved long-term memory and working memory in healthy adults compared to chamomile and hot water control. But peppermint's most important brain fog mechanism involves the gut-brain axis. Brain fog is frequently gut-driven. When the intestinal microbiome is dysbiotic, when the gut is producing excess gas, bloating, and sluggish transit, inflammatory signals travel up the vagus nerve to the brain and produce the foggy, heavy cognitive state millions of adults experience after meals. Peppermint specifically reduces intestinal inflammation and improves gut motility, clearing the gut-brain signal that produces postprandial brain fog. The traditional use. Fresh peppermint leaves consumed as tea. The Israelites who wept for mint were mourning both their clarity and their digestion. Modern neuroscience has confirmed the connection between the two. 4. Bacopa, the river plant that repairs the brain's communication system. Bacopa monnieri, an aquatic plant that grows along the slow-moving rivers of the ancient Near East and South Asia. Documented in Ayurvedic texts predating the Old Testament as the herb of the mind, specifically prescribed for what ancient physicians described as the troubled mind that cannot hold what it learns and cannot find what it knew. That is a clinical description of the working memory impairment at the core of brain fog. And here is what modern neuroscience says. Bacosides and Bacopa facilitate the repair of synaptic transmission by enhancing protein kinase activity at nerve junctions. In brain fog, synaptic transmission is slowed, producing the sensation that thoughts are arriving late, words are not accessible when needed, and cognitive processing feels effortful rather than automatic. Bacopa repairs the signaling infrastructure directly. A systematic review of 9 randomized controlled trials found Bacopa significantly improved delayed recall, memory acquisition, and speed of attention in healthy older adults after 12 weeks. The 12-week timeline is important. Bacopa is not an acute stimulant. It repairs, and repair takes time. The traditional use. Bacopa herb consumed daily. Available as standardized extract. The river plant that ancient scholars consumed for sustained cognitive performance across careers of intellectual work was rebuilding the synaptic infrastructure that brain fog erodes one slow connection at a time. 5. Sage. The salvation plant that preserves sound judgment. Here we are at number 5. The plant from Proverbs 3 verse 21. The double-blind trial result. Proverbs 3 verse 21. My son, preserve sound judgment and discernment. Do not let them out of your sight. The biblical command to preserve the clarity of mind as a life priority. And sage, whose Latin name comes from salver, to save, was the plant the ancient world associated with that preservation more than any other. In Latin, the name became salvia, to save. They named it for what they observed it doing to the aging mind. And here is what modern neuropsychiatry has confirmed. Sage inhibits acetylcholinesterase, the same mechanism as rosemary, but through different compounds, specifically rosmarinic acid and luteolin. It also inhibits butyrylcholinesterase, a second cholinesterase that becomes increasingly active as Alzheimer's disease progresses. The dual cholinesterase inhibition makes sage more comprehensively protective of the cholinergic system than any single pharmaceutical currently approved for cognitive conditions. A randomized double-blind trial found sage extract significantly improved immediate word recall, delayed word recall, attention, and accuracy in healthy adults across multiple age groups. A separate trial specifically in adults with subjective cognitive decline. The brain fog presentation, most common in 50-plus adults, found sage significantly improved cognitive scores after just 4 weeks. The traditional use. Fresh sage leaves steeped as tea consumed twice daily. Sage used in cooking. The ancient world that named this plant to save was preserving the cholinergic system that sound judgment specifically requires. 6. Lion's mane mushroom. The forest mushroom that grows back what brain fog has taken. Lion's mane mushroom grows wild across the oak forests of the ancient Levant and Near East. Mushrooms as food and medicine appear throughout ancient Near Eastern culture. And lion's mane does something for brain fog that no other plant on this list achieves through the same mechanism. It reverses the neurological damage that chronic inflammation has caused. And here is what modern neuroscience says. Hericinones and erinacines in lion's mane stimulate nerve growth factor, NGF, the protein that triggers the growth, maintenance, and repair of neurons. In chronic brain fog, particularly the post-viral fog that has affected millions in recent years, and the chronic stress-related fog most common in adults over 50. Neurons in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus are damaged by sustained inflammatory exposure. NGF stimulation triggers their repair. A randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial found lion's mane supplementation significantly improved cognitive function scores in older adults with mild cognitive impairment after 16 weeks. The scores declined again after supplementation was stopped, confirming the effect was real, direct, and required ongoing consumption. The traditional use. Lion's mane mushroom consumed fresh, dried, or as a tea. Available as standardized extract. The ancient forest mushroom that the biblical world's oak forest provided was offering neurogenic repair that modern neuropsychopharmacology is still trying to replicate in a pill. 7. Holy Basil. The sacred plant that clears the cortisol fog. Ocimum tenuiflorum. Tulsi. Present throughout the ancient world surrounding biblical civilization. At every threshold. In every healing garden. And for brain fog specifically, Holy Basil addresses the most common cause that most adults never connect to their cognitive symptoms. Cortisol. Chronically elevated cortisol. The signature of modern life under persistent low-grade stress. directly impairs prefrontal cortex function. The prefrontal cortex is the brain region responsible for working memory, decision-making, word retrieval, and the clear, organized thinking whose absence defines brain fog. Cortisol suppresses it, not metaphorically, structurally. Chronic cortisol exposure reduces prefrontal cortex gray matter volume and impairs its synaptic connectivity. And here is what modern endocrinology says. Ursolic acid and rosmarinic acid and holy basil inhibit cortisol production at the adrenal level, reducing the hormone that is physically shrinking the brain region responsible for clear thinking. A randomized clinical trial found holy basil extract significantly reduced stress scores, improved reaction time, and improved error rates in cognitive performance tests in adults with stress-related cognitive complaints after 6 weeks. A separate study confirmed significant cortisol reduction alongside improved cognitive flexibility scores. The traditional use, fresh or dried holy basil leaves steeped as tea, consumed twice daily. The ancient world that placed this plant at every threshold was placing the primary cortisol-reducing medicine at the exact location where the nervous system most needed calming. 8. Ashwagandha, the root that lowers the stress hormone clouding your mind. We have met ashwagandha on the anxiety list and the energy list, but its specific role in brain fog deserves its own entry because the mechanism connecting ashwagandha to cognitive clarity is distinct from its role in either energy or anxiety. Cortisol damages the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the brain region responsible for converting short-term experience into accessible long-term memory and for the flexible, rapid information retrieval that thinking clearly requires. Chronic cortisol exposure kills hippocampal neurons and reduces hippocampal volume. This is the anatomical foundation of stress-related brain fog. And here is what modern neuroscience says. Withanolides and ashwagandha not only reduce cortisol production, they specifically stimulate the regeneration of hippocampal neurons through BDNF upregulation. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor is the growth hormone of the brain. When BDNF is high, the hippocampus rebuilds. When it is low, as it is in chronic stress, the hippocampus shrinks and fog sets in. A randomized double-blind trial found ashwagandha root extract significantly improved immediate memory, general memory, executive function, and sustained attention in healthy adults over 8 weeks. The cognitive improvements were most pronounced in participants who had the highest reported stress levels at baseline, the people with the most cortisol-driven hippocampal suppression. The traditional use, ashwagandha root powder in warm milk at night, consumed daily across months. The Silk Road healers who prescribed this root for the clouded mind were working with the hippocampal cortisol BDNF axis that modern neuropsychology has since mapped in precise anatomical detail. 9. Green tea with L-theanine, the ancient beverage that creates focus calm. Green tea traveled the Silk Road into the ancient Near East and was present in the botanical pharmacopoeia of every civilization bordering biblical territory. And for mental clarity specifically, green tea delivers something that no other stimulant beverage achieves. Alert calm without the cortisol spike. And here is what modern neuropharmacology confirms. L-theanine in green tea increases alpha brain wave activity, the neural pattern of relaxed alertness and focused clarity. Caffeine in green tea simultaneously blocks adenosine receptors, removing the sleepiness signal. The combination produces a cognitive state that researchers describe as focus calm, high alertness without the anxious, scattered thinking that coffee alone or energy drinks produce. A randomized controlled trial found the specific combination of L-theanine and caffeine in ratios identical to brewed green tea significantly improved sustained attention, accuracy on cognitive tasks, and self-reported alertness compared to caffeine alone, L-theanine alone, or placebo. The combination produced better mental clarity than either component in isolation. EGCG in green tea simultaneously reduces neuroinflammation, addressing the inflammatory root of brain fog, while the L-theanine-caffeine combination addresses the immediate neurological state. 2 mechanisms. 1 beverage. The traditional use. Multiple cups of high-quality loose-leaf green tea consumed across the morning. Not the tea bag steeped for 30 seconds. Full leaf preparation in the temperature and time that preserves L-theanine and EGCG together. 10. Ginkgo biloba. The oldest living tree that opens the brain's blood supply. The ginkgo tree is the oldest living tree species on Earth, present in the ancient botanical world of every Silk Road civilization. And for brain fog specifically, ginkgo does something that every other plant on this list does not primarily target. It increases blood flow to the brain. And here is what modern neuroscience says. EGB 761. The standardized ginkgo extract studied in over 400 clinical trials increases cerebral blood flow by dilating the microvascular structures supplying brain tissue. The brain uses 20% of the body's oxygen at rest despite being only 2% of its mass. When cerebral blood flow is reduced by arterial stiffening, by vascular inflammation, by the cardiovascular effects of aging, brain tissue is progressively underoxygenated. Underoxygenated neurons are slow neurons. Slow neurons produce the subjective experience of brain fog. A meta-analysis of 21 randomized trials confirmed ginkgo extract significantly improved cognitive function, processing speed, and attention in adults with age-related cognitive complaints. A separate randomized trial found ginkgo significantly improved working memory performance and reduced subjective brain fog scores in adults over 60. The traditional use. Standardized ginkgo extract consumed daily. The oldest tree on Earth has been producing the cerebral vasodilation that brain fog requires to live for longer than any other plant in human history. Now let me pause here. If you're watching this video because your brain fog has become significantly disabling, if it is affecting your ability to work, manage daily life, or if it came on suddenly after an illness or injury, please see a doctor. Brain fog can be a symptom of serious and treatable conditions including thyroid dysfunction, sleep apnea, and anemia. The plants on this list support the cognitive clarity of healthy adults and complement medical care. They do not replace evaluation of serious symptoms. Now let's keep going. 11. Mucuna pruriens. The velvet bean that restores the brain's motivation signal. Mucuna pruriens. The velvet bean. Used in Ayurvedic medicine for over 3,000 years and traded along the Silk Road routes connecting South Asia with the ancient Near Eastern world. And for brain fog specifically, mucuna addresses a mechanism that no other plant on this list touches. Dopamine deficiency. Brain fog is not only an inflammatory and cholinergic condition. In many adults over 50, particularly those who describe their fog as a loss of motivation, mental drive, and the feeling of engagement with life that used to come naturally, the underlying neurochemistry is dopaminergic. Low dopamine in the prefrontal cortex produces exactly the unmotivated, disengaged, mentally flat quality that characterizes this type of brain fog. And here is what modern neuropharmacology says. Mucuna contains L-dopa, the direct precursor to dopamine, at concentrations that make it the richest natural dietary source of the compound that the brain converts directly into its primary motivation and reward neurotransmitter. A randomized double-blind trial found mucuna extract significantly improved motor function, quality of life, and cognitive engagement in adults with dopamine-deficient conditions. Multiple studies confirm measurable increases in brain dopamine levels after mucuna consumption. The traditional use. Mucuna seed preparations consumed daily. Available as standardized extract. The ancient Ayurvedic tradition that prescribed this velvet bean specifically for depleted motivation and mental dullness was working with the dopamine pathway that modern neuropsychology has since confirmed as the primary neurochemical basis of motivational brain fog. 12. Rosemary and sage combined. The dual cholinesterase inhibition of the ancient herb garden. Here we are at number 12. The plant combination consumed daily by every scholar and scribe in the ancient Near Eastern world. The one that increases alpha brain wave activity within 20 minutes of consumption. We have met rosemary and sage individually, but their combination produces a synergistic cholinesterase inhibition that modern neuropsychology is now studying specifically because neither compound achieves the same effect alone. Rosemary's 1,8-cineol inhibits acetylcholinesterase through one binding mechanism. Sage's rosmarinic acid and luteolin inhibit both acetylcholinesterase and butyrylcholinesterase through different binding sites on the same enzymes. When consumed together, as the ancient world consumed them in the same cooking preparations, the same herb gardens, the same daily meals, they produce comprehensive cholinergic protection that covers multiple enzymatic pathways simultaneously. A study found a combination of rosemary and sage extracts produced significantly greater improvements in memory and attention scores than either herb alone in healthy adults. The alpha brain wave increase measured within 20 minutes was attributed to the combined rapid absorption of 1,8-cineol from rosemary and rosmarinic acid from sage acting on the same cholinergic network simultaneously. The traditional use. Both herbs used together in cooking at every meal. The ancient Near Eastern herb garden that grew both side by side was producing a synergistic cognitive protection that modern neuropsychopharmacology is only now studying formally. 13. Schisandra, the five-flavor berry that sharpens the working mind. Schisandra chinensis, the five-flavor berry, traded along the Silk Road into the ancient Near Eastern world. And for brain fog specifically, Schisandra addresses mental fatigue, the specific form of cognitive impairment where the mind starts sharp in the morning and becomes progressively cloudier as the day advances. And here is what modern research says. Schisandra activates mitochondrial function, specifically in neurons, the brain cells that require the highest energy supply of any cell type in the body. When neuronal mitochondria are functioning optimally, cognitive performance is maintained across the day. When they tire, as they do in chronic fatigue, chronic stress, and nutritional depletion, the brain experiences the progressive afternoon fog that so many adults describe as their primary cognitive complaint. A randomized double-blind trial found Schisandra extracts significantly reduced mental fatigue, improved cognitive accuracy under sustained workload, and maintained work performance quality across an extended workday compared to placebo. The specific benefit under sustained cognitive demand distinguishes Schisandra from the acute stimulants that work only briefly. The traditional use. Dried Schisandra berries steeped as tea. The Silk Road scholars and traders who consumed this five-flavor berry daily were maintaining neuronal mitochondrial function across the long cognitive demands that their work required. 14. Cacao, the dark food that feeds the brain's clarity network. Theobroma cacao, the food of the gods, named by the ancient civilizations that discovered it. Present in the ancient Americas and entering the biblical world's geographic zone through the same Silk Road dynamics that carried every plant medicine in both directions. And here is what modern neuroscience says. Flavonols in raw cacao, specifically epicatechin and catechin, increase cerebral blood flow to the dentate gyrus of the hippocampus specifically. The dentate gyrus is the subregion of the hippocampus responsible for pattern separation, the cognitive function that allows you to distinguish similar memories, retrieve the right word from similar options, and maintain the precision of thought that brain fog most directly impairs. A randomized controlled trial published in Nature Neuroscience found high flavonol cacao consumption significantly improved dentate gyrus function and spatial memory performance in healthy adults over 50 after 3 months. The effect was equivalent to reversing approximately 20 years of age-related hippocampal decline. The critical preparation note: raw or minimally processed dark chocolate with 85% or higher cacao content. The processing that produces milk chocolate destroys the flavonols that produce the cognitive effect. The traditional use: raw cacao consumed daily. The ancient civilizations that named it the food of the gods were observing something specific about its effect on the mind. Modern neuroscience has located exactly where in the hippocampus that something occurs. 15. Walnuts. The brain-shaped nut that feeds every layer of cognitive function. The walnut appears throughout ancient Near Eastern literature as the food of scholars and scribes. And the most obvious thing about a walnut, its shape, is the most ironic thing in all of nutritional neuroscience. It looks exactly like a brain. 2 hemispheres. Convoluted surface. The ancient world noticed, and it was right. And here is what modern neuroscience says. DHA precursor ALA, omega-3 from walnuts is incorporated into neuronal cell membranes where it maintains membrane fluidity, the property that determines how efficiently electrical signals propagate between neurons. When membrane fluidity decreases, as it does with omega-3 deficiency, and with age, neural signal transmission slows. Thoughts arrive late. Processing feels effortful. The experience is brain fog. A study from UCLA found walnut consumption significantly associated with better cognitive test scores across multiple domains in U.S. adults. A randomized trial found walnut supplementation significantly improved inference speed and working memory performance in healthy young adults after 8 weeks. A separate study, specifically in older adults, found walnut consumption associated with slower cognitive decline over 2 years. The traditional use: walnuts consumed daily as food, not as an extract, as the whole nut that the ancient Near Eastern world had described them as brain food ate as an ordinary daily snack. 16. Thyme. The temple herb that clears inflammation from the mind. Thymus vulgaris. Thyme, one of the tithed herbs of the biblical world. Matthew 23 verse 23 references the careful tithing of herbs, including thyme. And thyme was tithed because it was genuinely valuable, consumed daily across every economic class in the ancient Near Eastern and Mediterranean world. And here is what modern neuroinflammation research says. Carvacrol in thyme specifically inhibits neuroinflammation through a mechanism distinct from turmeric and sage, by reducing microglial TNF-alpha secretion without the broad immune suppression that some anti-inflammatory compounds cause. Targeted microglial calming. The brain's immune cells quieted without impairing their function in genuine immune defense. A study found carvacrol from thyme significantly improved spatial learning and memory in experimental models of neuroinflammation. A separate study confirmed carvacrol crosses the blood-brain barrier and reduces hippocampal oxidative stress, protecting the memory center from the oxidative damage that chronic neuroinflammation produces. The traditional use: thyme used generously in cooking at every meal. The ancient world that tithed this herb, that valued it enough to give a portion to God, was consuming the targeted microglial anti-inflammatory that modern neuroinflammation research is now studying for cognitive protection. 17. Brahmi/water hyssop. The ancient scholar's plant that builds memory networks. Bacopa munieri is also called Brahmi, but water hyssop. Bacopa munieri's traditional name in Sanskrit carries a specific application distinct from the working memory repair we discussed in Entry 4. Traditional Ayurvedic medicine distinguished between Brahmi for immediate cognitive support and Brahmi for structural brain network building. Modern research has confirmed both applications exist through the same plant, but through different dose and duration protocols. For brain fog, specifically, the long-term building protocol, daily Bacopa consumption over 12 to 16 weeks produces measurable increases in the dendritic density of hippocampal neurons. More dendrites means more synaptic connections. More synaptic connections means faster, more efficient neural communication. The fog that comes from impaired neural efficiency clears not because of a stimulant effect, but because the structural substrate of clear thinking has been rebuilt. A clinical study found that adults who completed a 16-week course of Bacopa supplementation showed improvements in verbal learning rate, memory consolidation, and speed of visual information processing that persisted for 4 weeks after supplementation was stopped, confirming structural neural changes rather than acute pharmacological effects. The traditional use, Bacopa consumed daily as a long-term practice, not for a week, for months. The ancient scholars who consumed this plant across their working careers were building the neural networks that their sustained intellectual demands required. 18. Black pepper, the spice that delivers every other plant to the brain. Black pepper appears throughout biblical and ancient Near Eastern trade documentation as one of the most consistently traded spices in the ancient world. Present everywhere, used in everything. And for brain fog specifically, black pepper does something that no other plant on this list does at all. It makes every other plant work better. And here is what modern pharmacology says. Piperine in black pepper inhibits P-glycoprotein, the transporter protein that pumps foreign compounds out of the brain's protective blood-brain barrier before they can act. Many plant compounds that have demonstrated neurological effects in laboratory studies fail to reach the brain in adequate concentrations, because P-glycoprotein removes them. Piperine blocks this removal mechanism, increasing the brain bioavailability of every other plant compound consumed alongside it. This is why turmeric with black pepper achieves what turmeric alone cannot. Why sage and rosemary consumed with black pepper seasoned food penetrate the blood-brain barrier more effectively than without it. Piperine is the delivery mechanism that maximizes the effect of everything else on this list. A study confirmed piperine significantly increased the brain bioavailability of multiple nutraceutical compounds, including curcumin, EGCG, and quercetin. Piperine-specific inhibition of P-glycoprotein in cerebral capillary cells was confirmed as the mechanism. The traditional use, black pepper used in every meal. The ancient world that added black pepper to every preparation was inadvertently maximizing the brain bioavailability of every other medicinal plant compound consumed at the same meal. 19. Rosehip, the ancient berry that reduces the inflammation causing cognitive fog. The wild rose grew throughout the biblical Levant. Its fruit was eaten across the ancient Near Eastern and Mediterranean world as a winter food, a vitamin source, and a medicine. And for brain fog specifically, rosehip works through the vitamin C neuroinflammation connection that most discussions of brain health completely overlook. And here is what modern neuroscience says. The brain contains the highest concentration of ascorbic acid, vitamin C, of any organ in the body except the adrenal glands. Vitamin C is an essential cofactor for the synthesis of norepinephrine and serotonin, the neurotransmitters of alertness, motivation, and mood. When brain vitamin C is depleted by chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and dietary insufficiency, neurotransmitter synthesis falls. The result is the flat, unmotivated, cognitively gray experience of vitamin C deficiency brain fog. Rosehip contains 20 times more vitamin C per gram than orange. And GoPo, its specific galactolipid, reduces neuroinflammatory markers independently of vitamin C, providing a dual anti-fog mechanism through a single berry. A randomized controlled trial found rosehip supplementation significantly improved vitality, reduced mental fatigue, and improved cognitive energy scores in adults with self-reported brain fog after 6 weeks. The traditional use: dried rose hips steeped as tea, fresh rose hips when available. The ancient world that gathered rose fruits as winter food was maintaining the brain vitamin C concentrations that neurotransmitter synthesis requires to keep the mind clear and energized. 20. The ancient scholar's daily practice, the pattern that made every plant work. And here we are at number 20. Daniel 1 verse 17. To these 4 young men God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. The Bible's most striking description of extraordinary mental clarity. And the context is specific. Daniel and his companions had refused the king's food, the processed, refined, meat-heavy diet of the Babylonian court, and consumed instead vegetables, water, and the plant-based food tradition of their people for 10 days. And at the end of those 10 days, their minds are described as superior to all the other young men in the king's court. Modern neuroscience has now confirmed what the author of Daniel observed. The dietary pattern most consistently associated with the lowest rates of cognitive decline in population research is not a supplement protocol. It is a food pattern, the mind diet, Mediterranean intervention for neurodegenerative delay. Incorporates the specific plant categories that appear on this list as its foundation. Dark leafy greens, berries, nuts, whole grains, herbs and spices, olive oil, fish, minimal processed food. A study from Rush University, following 923 adults, found those who most closely followed the mind diet had cognitive function equivalent to adults 7.5 years younger than their chronological age. Not through a drug, not through a single supplement, through the daily food pattern that the ancient Near Eastern world maintained as a matter of ordinary life. The 5 that most adults over 50 accept as their permanent cognitive state is not aging. It is the accumulated nutritional deficit of a modern diet that has systematically removed the plant compounds that the mind requires to remain clear, sharp, and engage across an entire lifetime. The plants on this list are the prescription. Daniel's practice is the principle. And the clarity that the ancient world described as a gift from God was, in nutritional terms,